Hi, everybody. I'm Chris Barton,
And I'm Jennifer Ziegler.
and we both write books for young readers, and we like talking with other authors of books for young readers about the dedications in their book. That's what this video series, this one's dedicated to, is all about. And today we are talking with our friend Dashka Slater. Hello, Dashka.
Hello.
And we're going to talk with Dashka today about her book, The Book of Fatal Errors. Would you read the dedication, Dashka?
Happy to. In memory of my father, Philip Slater.
Thank you.
Would you mind explaining why you dedicated the book to your father?
So it's kind of an interesting chain of books that led to this dedication. I grew up in a household where children's books were kind of the language of the family. I'm the youngest of four, and my parents used to give children's books to each other. They called each other pet names based on books that they had read. And my father read to all four of his kids from, the time we were tiny up until we were teenagers. So all the kind of classics of children's literature I heard read aloud by my father, from the Narnia books to Lord of the Rings, and especially all 35 of the Oz books, which I have some of, my brother has most of. They were my father's favorite books, and that he read when he was a kid and reread up, until he died in his 80s. And they were books that he always said were kind of responsible for his career path. I could talk about that later. So when he was dying, I was writing my book, and the Book of Fatal Errors, and was really so excited for him to read it because it has all these kind of references to children's literature in it, and I knew he would appreciate it. But it was a mess. It wasn't even coherent. And so I couldn't give it to him to read yet. And so I tried to tell him about it. And it was really like his very last weeks of being alive. And he was dying of cancer. And, he was sort of following it and sort of not. I remember him going, that sounds really interesting, And so it was kind of this unfinished piece of business for me that he died before I could share this book that I felt was very much our book in a lot of ways. And so his death ended up going into the book, and which turned out to be a lot about a children's book author whose father dies. And so it was kind of foreordained that the book would be dedicated to my father, who had also dedicated a book to me.
Oh, can you read that dedication?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is my father's most famous book. It's called The Pursuit of Loneliness, published in 1970s, still in print. And it is dedicated to Wendy, Scott, Stephanie, and Dashka. So those are his four children.
So was there already the element in the story of the children's book author while you're writing this, while your dad was still alive, or is that something that came along afterwards?
So Kirsten Collins, who's the children's book author in the story, is the great grandmother of Rufus Collins and Abigail Vasquez, who are the two main characters. And she existed, there was absolutely from the beginning this children's book connection. But, I often say that the answers to all narrative problems are somewhere in the text already. And that was very true for this book, where trying to solve the mystery of what had motivated Kirsten Collins to do the thing that sets the plot in motion. I didn't know at the time, like, why had she done this terrible thing? And as I, wrote through, I began to discover that the death of her father was intimately connected to her life choices, as it was. As I was going through the grief for my own father's death, I hasten to say this is not like a grieving book. It's
I've read it.
It really is mostly like a humorous fantasy, but it's that stuff is underneath.
Do you find that you approach a dedication differently or regard a dedication differently when a book is dedicated to someone who is no longer living?
This is the first time that I've done that. And I have an earlier picture book that's dedicated to both my parents. And so, this one was kind of much more consciously like, that the first time I dedicated to my father and my mother, it was like, you all brought me into the world of books. Here's, one of my first books right back at you. It was like a very sort of simple thing of like tip of the hat to these people who, taught me to love reading. And this, dedicating to someone who's, not going to see the dedication is a much more like, it's much graver endeavor, and this, a sense of a tribute rather than here you go. And dedications, I think, are always complicated. I probably overthink them a lot. When I heard you all were doing this series, I thought, oh, wow, that's something I really thought about a lot, because it is a gift that you hope somebody wants to receive. Luckily, I kind of feel confident that my parents do.
But there's also the element of surprise when you get to present a book to someone that you've dedicated. And so you don't want to tell them ahead of time. You don't want to ask them, because
Right.
it brings a surprise. With your father, gone by the time this book came out, were there people that you, other than him, who you wanted to see this book, or that you presented this book to so they could see that you dedicated to your dad?
Definitely my siblings, who I knew would get the whole context of it, that we had been the recipients of the dedication. We had all read these same books that are kind of referenced, obliquely in the Book of Fatal Errors, and, that they would sort of get the whole picture of it.
So, is there anything else about the dedication or the book itself that you'd like us to know about?
Well, I suppose the kind of the full circle piece of it is that there is a dedication in the book of one of Carson Collins' books is dedicated to her father. So there's and uses the same wording as the dedication.
Oh yeah, I picked up on that when I read it, and of course I wasn't taking notes, and so I forgot about that.
Yeah, so there's a scene in the novel where Rufus is talking with a librarian who is a big fan of the Glistening Glen books, which are his great grandmother's books, and she even has a tattoo that's based on one of the characters in the book, and she references the quote that's on her tattoo, and then and sort of explains. And Rufus, who actually hasn't read the books, he's not actually a big fan of these family books, and so she references the ending of the book, and he asks her what it means, and she flips to the front of the book and shows him that it's dedicated in memory of her father, and to kind of explain that she had just lost her father, and that might be influencing what she wrote. So many layers of dedications.
Yeah, this is a dedication that needs a diagram.
Right, exactly. But you don't want to dedicate a book to someone who's like, receiving it like, it's an itchy sweater or something. Like, thanks.